All right. I am here with Elaine Wolf Komarow, licensed acupuncturist in Virginia and author of the Acupuncture Observer. Welcome, Elaine. Thanks for joining us.
You are very welcome. Always happy to talk about this stuff.
Great. Yeah, I'm excited for this because somebody referred me to the Acupuncture Observer, and I saw that the last post on there was in 2023 talking about issues of debt. And I'm always I guess I'm still a little bit surprised by how long these conversations have been going on. So can you give us a little bit, tell us a little bit about your background in acupuncture and how you were writing about all of these problems in the industry a long time ago?
Sure. I started acupuncture school in 1992 in Maryland at a school that was then the Traditional Acupuncture Institute, and then became Thai Sophia, and then became MUI, and now is out of business. But when I started school, I lived in Maryland, but close to Virginia. And my now husband, then I think boyfriend, maybe fiance when I started school, lived in Virginia. And so uh, at the time in Virginia, you couldn't practice acupuncture here unless you were a medical doctor.
Hmm.
But there had been a group of acupuncturists who lived in Virginia but practiced in Maryland who were working to get legislation through the Virginia House or Virginia legislature that would allow non-physicians to practice acupuncture. So even from the time that I was in school, I was involved with regulatory agencies and legislatures and getting legislation passed. Um, so I graduated from school in 95. I was the fourth person licensed in the state of Virginia because the
Wow.
the law went into effect in January, and in February I got my license, and I have been had a private practice here for tomorrow. It will be 31 years.
Wow.
So
Okay. Wow. You have been there from the beginning of the licensure there in Virginia.
right. And
Wow.
so from
Okay.
early on, kind of understanding why things are the way they are and seeing how they might go and understanding some of the debates within the profession and just stayed involved for a really long time until I got probably at about 23 finally 2023 finally threw up my hands and was like
Okay.
I
Yeah.
can't do this
I want to talk
anymore.
about that. I want to talk about that. But so leading up to that, what sort of systemic problems were you seeing and writing about, and like how long do you feel like these issues you were writing about have been kind of obvious and well known?
Well, it depends how we define the issues,
Hmm.
but from the beginning, um, so Maryland, and I don't know if this may have changed in the past few years, but Maryland is one of the few states that did not require the national board exams. I'm going to use the wrong initials because a lot of these initials have just changed,
Yeah.
but the organization formerly the NCCAOM, um, Maryland was one of the few states that did not require that exam. And Virginia was going to require that exam. So even some of the people who fought to get the legislation passed to practice never ended up practicing here because
Hmm.
and the reason it makes a difference about that exam is acupuncture is a very lineage-based tradition, a very old tradition, different schools of thought, modern
Yeah.
acupuncture, so how do you test this information?
Right.
And the board exams were pretty geared towards, well, first you have the question of how do you even test kind of energetic medicine anyway?
Yeah.
Um, and then they were geared towards a certain tradition. And the
Hmm.
school that I went to was founded by some real leaders of kind of Caucasian acupuncture in the United States. I mean, that's another issue of like who is making the decisions.
Mm,
Um, and the tradition of that school was not the primary tradition in the United States. So anyway, I'm giving that background because even from the very, very beginning, when we were working to get this legislation passed, there were these real kind of splits of, okay, there's an exam that kind of favors one lineage, one set of teaching.
mm,
And as we're building, as more and more states are regulating acupuncture, some of these initial splits about does it even make sense to have an exam or what tradition is important to us or what's the common knowledge we need to have,
yeah.
that was never resolved. And that just kind of
Mm,
kept,
yes.
and I remember the same founders of the school I went to felt pretty strongly that when we talked about professionalizing acupuncture, we were putting the profession in danger. Like as soon as we put on a white coat and we're like
Mm,
separating ourselves from a medicine that traditionally might be, the name somebody in the community, a family would have been acupuncturists, and the knowledge is passed on, and the community kind of seeks out on their own a practitioner without the stamp of an authority on it.
yeah.
Um, they kind so not articulating this very well, but they felt kind of strongly that, for instance, if we got acupuncture into emergency rooms, that would be great. Let's go teach doctors a few important points they could put in as they're in the emergency room, and kind of the more people that can access this medicine, the better. Versus kind of people who were like, no, 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 this is very important. We have to keep this knowledge to ourselves and we need to be the experts. And, you know,
Yeah.
how dare these doctors think they might be able to do something that we can do? So that was this other split.
Yeah.
And we would have situations where a state would be looking at regulation or legislation, and there would be different groups of acupuncturists, some saying like, no, no, we want other people to be able to use this medicine, or no, we think it's terrible that people will have to take one exam, and other groups that would come, from the same profession saying
Yeah.
like the exact opposite. And here are these decision makers, politicians saying, how are we supposed to do anything when you don't even have agreement within your community about
Mm,
how you want to proceed?
yeah.
And so I think those were never resolved, those
Mm,
basic differences of like, how much do we want to be a part of the system? How much do we want to own the medicine and keep it for ourselves? How
yeah.
much do we want to standardize it? And so I think right from the start, there were fault lines that
Yeah.
just never got we never found common agreement on them, and it was just a
Yeah.
matter of winners and losers,
Yeah.
decade after decade of different winners and losers. And
Mm,
I think that's kind of a lot of these issues, how it's like, okay, 30
yeah.
years later, and we never resolved it. We never came together. There's still winners and losers, and unfortunately now the losers are, it might be the whole profession.
Mm, yeah. A couple things that came to mind as you recounted that history is the um, consensus making around core competencies. Um, and I think that's really important for a group, so lots of different types of groups also to come together and decide kind of like where's the boundaries, like where's our membrane? If we're this distinct social organism thing profession, like what defines us? And then how do things kind of come in and out? How do we interface with the wider
Right,
world? And then if you have core competencies, then you can start to say, okay, what's a reasonable exam based on these? because then people can study the core competencies and be have assurance that they're going to perform well
Right.
on the exam. But if you kind of say like, well, this is a mishmash of a lot of different traditions in schools, which is I think part of what makes alternative medicine interesting and vibrant and effective. And it draws people to it. They have a special like identity connection too, like a certain lineage. Um, but if you don't have the core competencies, then all these other lineages are, it's very confusing for the learner too,
Right.
if you're going to test them on like a lineage that they didn't study. Um, so yeah, I think there's like a lot of themes for like alternative medicine in what you were saying. Um, and then I think when you add on to that, this idea of like, no, it has to be like a 3-year master's degree. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because that's weird, right? Like a master's degree, first of all, it's like, do you even need a master's degree to practice to and for entry level work? Like if it was just a license previously. But like I think when you add on this like arbitrary choice of like, let's pile on all these hours because I don't know, because of this, this, and this. But like to me, that's also a very early fault line in what
Right.
developed.
Yeah. And, you know, if I knew once upon a time, I don't know that I know now why specifically it was a master's degree, other than that most of the people who were pursuing this profession were college graduates already and maybe had whole other professions. And it wasn't gonna, really was more like a technical degree, probably, which was kind
Yeah.
of what Pocatech has sometimes said. I think it's more, it was
Mm,
people who came from an academic background who were trying to figure out a way to, like, we need an educational program. I do think right when I started school was right when student loans were becoming available for a
mm,
master's degree in acupuncture. And so it may have been a logistical kind of fitting within, like,
yeah.
that's what we can get
Yeah.
loans for.
Yeah.
But I also know it's also weird because there are some acupuncture programs. I don't know if it is still the case, but it used to be some programs and some states you didn't need to have a full bachelor's. You could enter, I think, with 2 years towards a bachelor's. So that's weird too. Are there other fields where you can get a master's without having a bachelor's? So,
Mm,
I think the whole I believe it was in California where the state was saying we need some idea of how long these acupuncture programs are going to be. And a couple people who had acupuncture programs kind of on the spur of the moment between meetings of the California legislature were like, well, my program's this many hours, and oh, my program's this many hours. And they kind of
mm,
came up with some compromise. And I think probably calling it a master's was subsequent to that. I don't even
mm,
really know that. Um,
mhm.
it, I mean, it gets even more the doctorate. Then when they added the doctorate, that's I think when I really kind of started being more of an outspoken person about my concerns about where the profession was heading.
When
Um,
was that? About what time?
I'm gonna say about 2013, but
Hmm.
I don't know.
Mm,
I also know the master's programs had gotten longer.
mm,
Uh, and I know that what I do know is that the expansion of the master's programs was not because, oh, we're finding that our graduates are lacking in certain areas, and so we need to add more education in this. It had more to do with I think originally it had to do with our master's program isn't comparable to other master's degrees that are out there or other professional degrees. So we're going to expand our hours so it looks more like a conventional degree program.
Yeah.
The doctorate also came very much from a like, there's been so much in the profession of wanting respect and wanting recognition of our special. We've learned so much. We know this stuff. It's so complex. And how is it that chiropractors are doctors? And it was around the time
Mm.
that the PTs were deciding that they should all have an
Mm.
entry level doctorate.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I first met Lisa. That's one of the things we were talking about.
Mm.
Um, our concerns about what this was going to do when we added doctorates, and there was you know, one, how that was going to be fair to existing practitioners who maybe had been in practice for 20 years. And, now we have students coming out of programs brand new, but they're doctors. Like, how do we navigate that? A
Mm.
lot of a lot of the fault lines in the profession, like education and length of education is one, insurance and how we participate in that market is another. There's been a lot of, we want to add this thing. It doesn't have to change what you're doing. Like you can, if you don't want to take insurance, you don't need to take insurance, but we should absolutely fight for acupuncture to be included in insurance. Or, oh, if you don't want to get a doctorate, fine, don't get a doctorate. We just, but people who want the doctorate, shouldn't be deprived of getting one. And, it's hard to argue with that, but there are consequences of each of those decisions. Like
Yeah.
when a profession starts taking insurance, it affects everybody, even the people who don't necessarily want to participate in that market.
Yeah.
The original doctorates, which were post-master's degree there's two doctorates and really there's four if you include herbal medicine, but there was
Right.
the doctorate for people who had gotten a master's and been in practice for a while and really wanted to deepen their education. That was beginning to exist and, you know, didn't really impact much. It was a small number of people, but when it was the first professional doctorate, like we should be moving in the direction of having all acupuncturists be doctors because that's the standard for medical care in our country.
Mm.
Even as we're entering, I mean, as usual with acupuncture, we're like 30 years behind the curve because in Western medicine, more and more care is not provided by the doctor, but by the nurse
Yeah.
practitioner or the physician assistant or the medical extender or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's like you don't start. I've heard a lot of people who started school more recently who were basically told, I mean, you really should get the doctorate. You really should get the full herbal education because in some states it will require that. And because
Yeah.
that's the standard now. And so that even though
Yeah.
people could set up practices legally and be fine with a master's, if
Mm.
you're like starting school and investigating a program and they're selling you that really to make the most of
Yeah.
this profession. You need the doctorate, you need the herbal, and that's all of a sudden, they're in programs that are going to be $100,000.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
there just wasn't a lot of, there's never been a creating the common ground of, okay, we've seen the risks, we've seen the pluses. How can we kind of develop in this direction, or do we want to develop in this direction? There's always been, again, the winners and the losers, and
Yeah.
the like, well, if we do this, it doesn't have to change what you do at all, which is just not
But it
realistic
does
for what
affect,
happens
yeah,
out there.
does
Yeah.
affect the wider profession and other people. Yeah.
And I think it
Okay.
helps schools, the people, then they had the transitional doctorate for people who had gotten a master's, weren't
Yeah.
going to go back to school. That's how they address the what do we do about the people who already have their master's and aren't going to start over? And in a way that I think made the debt problem worse because it gave the schools room to not address the overall cost of the education because you had the people who had come out and were successful in the profession be like, oh,
Hmm.
well, I should get this extra little 1 year. I can do it online program that will enable me to call myself a doctor. That might
Oh,
cost, $15,000, I think is what a lot of them cost.
oh,
And what that did is meant that a lot of schools could kind of pad their income for a few years as these existing practitioners went back to get that transitional doctorate.
yeah,
They didn't have to face the fact that, okay, but when it comes to the people who are starting from scratch, this is a big burden. And these aren't people who have already been successful and paid off previous loans or whatever. So I feel like that was another
yeah,
kind of, I don't know if moral hazard is the right word here, but it was like kind of
yeah.
filled their coffers for a while so they didn't
Hmm.
have, it's like plastering over the cracks in the wall from the fault line. Like we're
Yeah,
just see, it's
right.
fine.
Let's not really delve into this or it does, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, in a way, I mean the idea of like continuing education when you're already working and you're in a place when you want to do it, like that kind of makes a little bit more sense to me than like a really long, expensive entry level thing. But like you said, they're trying to pull everybody into that initial entry level thing because and I think another issue I've seen is that the schools are incentivized to get the money while they can and while the students are there. They're not, uh, and I guess maybe that's not like acknowledged enough to where like these are institutions with incentives and incentive structure, and they're kind
Oh
of
yeah.
following that versus like that's not necessarily what's best for the whole ecosystem and like paying back the loans and like a happy professional who's able to do this for their career and like pay back the loan, let's say within 10 years. So then they have a portion of their career when
Right.
it's
I mean,
actually paid off.
that entry level doctorate and the cost of that, it is such a heavy burden for people who even if it's even when it was a less expensive master's degree or when I went and it was because student loans hadn't been available for very long, it was pretty economical.
Mm.
Um, but even then, there was not a small set. I mean, there was a significant subset of my colleagues who just never really made it professionally. They just never succeeded
Yeah.
in terms of setting up a viable practice on their own.
Yeah. I mean,
And
isn't
that,
that like any endeavor in life, right? Any investment that people make, you would never expect 100%
right,
of small businesses to succeed. If you were an investor, you would never expect like 100% of your investments to like there's risk, you
right.
know?
And right, plenty of people go to
It,
school to become an accountant or something, and they get
yeah.
out and they're like, "This sucks. I don't want to be an
Yeah,
accountant."
yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so I don't think that in and of itself was necessarily alarming. I think there were things that people didn't understand about what it meant to be setting up your own practice that like the schools could have done a better job of. But it makes it so much harder when the debt they're coming out
Right.
with is
That's
so high.
yeah.
And that's, I'm getting to be, I'm in my 60s now and I'm thinking about retiring. And I mean, I have a practice that sustains me. I mean, I think it's a good, solid practice. And people are like, well, couldn't you sell that practice? Like, couldn't,
Hmm.
because, I'm like, well, I'll keep working because I don't have a pension or anything. So I'm going to keep doing it.
Hmm.
And it's like the people coming out, people who have a successful practice wouldn't need my practice. And people coming out of school can't afford to buy a practice. They've already got
Right.
student debt. So that's the other kind of it's not that I expect everybody to succeed, but when you have somebody starting out and setting up a business and building a practice. Like that all takes money up front before you're generating anything. So if you're
Right.
already $100,000 in debt, you've just like it's so much harder.
Yeah.
And I also think a lot of those students who are entering now were given a false promises about
Mm.
what the job market was going to be. But there's this very
Yeah.
circular argument of like, well, but if you get a doctorate, then you're going to get employed by the hospitals. You know, that's where we're headed for. That's why we want to have be doctors, because then we're going to be part of the system, even as the system itself is just kind of falling apart, which was,
Yeah.
that was the same when I started writing about the insurance stuff. I'm like, but it doesn't seem like doctors are really stoked about
Right.
how
Right.
insurance is impacting the way they practice medicine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we sure? It,
Right. And like, how could we test this on a small scale before we went all in on it? And what's the market analysis? What's the cost benefit? Like those types of conversations. It seems like very aspirational, but the people doing the aspirating, the aspirationaling, they're not the ones taking out the loans. The funding for the project comes from the federal government, and but the responsibility is placed solely on the students. These loans aren't like a business loan, right? They're not as easy to discharge with bankruptcy. It's from the federal government, so they can, for example, garnish your Social Security or your your tax return, like things like that. But I mean, the federal loans are do have like generally better terms, and some cancellation options. But it's it just seems like the risk has kind of gone up and up and up. Um, at the risk is all on the students. It's not on
right.
the people cooking up these pathways. And there seems to be no need in the past to like justify the changes based on like earnings or employment data or any sort of grounded reasoning of like, is this good for
Yeah,
the
I just,
students in a
yeah.
realistic
I
way?
mean, I would have loved all along. I mean, and I think at one point it was discussed, and I understand it would be complicated to figure out, but I would have loved a program that's like the responsibility for paying off the loan is split between the
Yeah.
student and the school,
Yeah, no, that's been
like,
talked about as, yeah, I think some schools are moving to something like that, which is risk sharing.
yes,
Um, and now we have the accountability metrics coming, and because the federal government can see that the loans aren't getting paid
right.
back. So so now they're trying to put pressure for change by just cutting the loans down and doing the
Yeah.
earnings
It, it it's
test.
it is so sad to me that the schools, and I think some of I think if you looked at every school, there are different reasons why each school maybe, did things the way they did or didn't do things the way they didn't do things. But I do think sometimes in the alternative medicine communities too, there's a little bit of the I haven't read this stuff, so I may be referring to the wrong book, but like The Secret or something like that. I believe the idea of The
Yeah,
Secret
yeah,
is you
yeah,
just,
yeah.
as long as you think positively, um,
Well,
eh,
and
eh,
also like critiques are like pathologized kind of immediately, where it's
yeah,
like, and you're not thinking positively.
right,
So come
right,
on, like
right,
and then that's why you're gonna
right.
fail, or that's why you can't be part of the group, is that you're not into the positive mindset about all of this.
Yeah, I know that the school that I went to, um, they at some point moved, when I went to school, they rented like a floor of a, business, an office building. And then at some point they're like, we want to go build our beautiful campus, which they did. And I remember hearing a story about the funding for that building. And, the story was like, we had this vision, we had this dream, and the money, wasn't there. But we believed it was going to happen. And at the
But we
last
increased
minute,
tuition. Oh,
well, I don't know. In this case, I mean, that was part of it, and part of
yeah,
it was like the magical, and then the magical benefactor came and
yeah,
at the
yeah,
last minute, like presented us with it, and so like, see, it works, and the reality was much messier, and the
mm,
compromises they made to get that building built ultimately is what kind of killed the program because
mm.
it was one of these like, well, the way we had to structure the loan or
Oh,
whatever.
yeah, yeah, right,
So,
yeah,
so I do think so I think some schools had that attitude. Some I think are just, it is, I don't know. I look at kind of the way decisions about everything in this country. It's like look at climate change. We've known climate
yeah,
change is a risk to humanity for 50 years or more.
yeah,
And how much closer are we to an actual solution? And like some of it is selfishness, and some of it is, business, and some of it is like all our best ideas affect people other than us more than us. So like, you
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah,
I don't think it's just this profession, but it is kind of amazing to me how many programs just were unwilling to kind of consider where this was all going as these tuitions got
yeah,
higher and higher and higher.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, through a certain time frame, it was like, higher education was going really well, right? You have like more people coming in every year. That was the message of like, go to college, it's a valuable thing. But now that you have all this decline, like generally, like the number of people graduating high school is going to go down, fewer people,
Yeah,
the
fewer
populate
people.
demographically, and then lower participation rate. So the percentage of people going to college looks like it's going down. And so there's a lot of commentary in higher education circles that smaller private schools it's just very difficult. Like it doesn't matter if that it's an acupuncture school. It's like if you have under 2,500 students and no endowment, then you're in big trouble. So you should be planning ahead and looking to merge or just, really understand the stark reality. And then it's like schools with like under 1,000 students, you know, are kind of saying, "Ah, I think we're probably good to go. We're doing okay here." And I'm like, it doesn't make I sort of understand why you would spin it publicly. I get it with the press releases, but like there's also like internally, I think like it seems very little like pointed questions, let's say by like expectations for the leadership to show the staff and faculty a 3-year projection, let's say. Like, show us where you
Yeah.
think enrollment is going to go. Show us where you think like tuition revenue is going to go. Because we
The,
would like this thing to continue. We feel like this is good for students. We would like to have jobs in 3 years.
well, I feel like in this profession, they would spin magic the way they do about for 20 years,
Yeah,
telling people like for
yeah,
30 years they've been saying, well, once we're part of Medicare, then we're going to be,
right.
hugely in demand, or like once we take insurance, it's going to be fantastic, or once the hospitals are hiring us. But it's more like regardless of the numbers they give to the faculty, like when many of these schools close, and I hear from colleagues like, oh, I'm heartbroken for my old institution, and it
Yeah,
was such a good school. But you mentioned endowments, and like I know
Yeah.
for a number of years after I graduated, I was making a annual donation. And I 40
Mm.
some years later, I make a donation to my college that I went to.
Yeah.
But how many people, and not that I necessarily think it's a should or a, but like it's interesting that I would think that would be some mark of satisfaction, or like if we ha really have a
Yeah.
strong base,
Right.
why don't any of our alumni, why don't we have alumni contributions? Why don't we
Yes.
have an alumni club? Why don't we have, they're just
Yes,
like,
my
it
thoughts
doesn't,
exactly. Yeah, it's like this is what healthy schools do is they have an active alumni association and they feel like a connection to the school and they want it to improve. And so that's like and that's part of the projections too, right? It's like how much do you think you're going to get in contributions, right? Is that a goal? Like what's a realistic goal for your situation? And I don't know, I don't see a lot of that um
yeah,
either. And I don't get it.
yeah, I think in acupuncture now, the I don't know how much of the problem is the demographic. I mean, it is the demographics coming in, but I feel like the profession is sort of setting aside the education issue. It's more like the schools closing is a reflection of what's happening in the profession
Mm,
because we've created this. Really, it's the two things together. We're like going into the insurance model, which basically reduces, if it doesn't reduce income for most practitioners, it's certainly like you have to work more hours to make the same money. I
yeah.
mean, this is where it's so different from Western medicine that I feel like our profession didn't look at. Western medicine, doctors very much have become, I'm signing off on work that is done by other people,
Yeah.
like one doctor is billing for a lot of services that they're barely providing, they're spending 2 minutes with
Right.
each patient. But because acupuncture and I think other alternative modalities as well. I mean, our whole like, how dare anybody else touch the needle? Like, that is, we're going to come after you. So
Right.
everything,
That's our
all the
work. Right.
service,
We want to
ha
do that work.
yes, everything has to be provided by the practitioner. And
Right.
it just does not work. The reason people went into acupuncture is many of them because they knew that the Western model was not seeing, the whole person and the people in all their complexity. So I want to go into something where I can really get to know people, but we're going to go into this payment model that doesn't allow me to do that at the same time that like, well, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to have this title, so I'm going to spend more for that. So like, I'm
Yeah.
not sure. I kind of feel like the education has gone up as the income and the satisfaction of what it means has gone down. And
Yeah.
it was a, a child of a friend of my husband, so somebody who I do not know that well. I mean, my husband was like, "Oh, so and so's daughter is just about to enter acupuncture school." And I just was like, I mean, I don't know the feeling. I kind of sent my husband an article. I was like, I don't know if you want to share this with them or not, but like, I can't recommend it as a profession
Right. Yeah.
right now. And
Yeah.
so like I don't know where how much of that is the debt and how much of that is I mean, another thing that we didn't talk about that I think is part of the problem within the profession, and maybe this is true in other alternative modalities as well. There aren't very many of us, and sustaining all of the organizations that are involved in maintaining a profession,
Right.
like you're going to have your state organizations, you're going to have your national organizations, you're going to have
Right.
regulatory boards, you're going to have all the, credentialing agencies. All of those take hours, and when you're
Right.
pulling from a small population of people,
Right.
people don't want to do it, or the same people do it forever. And, what's happened. I mean, I was on the state regulatory board for like 8 years. I was involved with the state level association, professional association for like 20 some years.
Mm.
And you'd be
Yeah.
begging people. So like, I don't want to keep doing this. Is anybody going to do it? And the only time people would want to do it is when they were pissed about what the other people had done.
Right.
Like,
Right.
how dare you? You had a polite conversation with the physical therapist. You're out. So that also makes it very hard to, I think, address any of these are like big, complex issues. It takes like lots of people sitting down and willing to have like really hard conversations about
Yeah.
like what is the impact on the whole global thing when we make this change. And they're
Hmm.
just, you know, and when you talk about the schools and kind of coming up with projections or the whole conversation about insurance, I would always say there are experts out there who do nothing but look at this kind of stuff.
Yes.
People
Exactly.
write books about it. People like,
Exactly.
okay, we've been sponsoring legislation to like have acupuncture included in Medicare for 30 years. Have we ever spoken to anybody who really understands Medicare? No, because I've been on committees where we've come up with these documents just kind of crowdsourced that in the end get edited anyway because the people who are putting out that document have an answer that they want. So I'm
Yeah.
like, how do we think we're going to manage this when we aren't even willing to like hire
Yeah.
somebody with expertise in the like
Yeah.
with the school?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you said that because that's another thing that I've seen is just like not accessing external expertise, like operating in a small vacuum and bubble, right? And not learning from external expertise to like put together these projections. Like, yeah, you have a unique situation, but you kind of take the insight from and see what applies to you, what closely applies to,
Yeah.
your situation.
I
Yeah,
mean,
that always kind of
yeah, 10 years
got
ago,
me.
there was plenty of evidence about the impact of going to an insurance model on small private practices.
Mm.
There barely are medical small private practices anymore, partially because of
Right.
the whole
Yeah, because of
insurance
the right. Yeah. Yeah.
navigation. I remember one of the early posts I wrote was about, something about the Titanic, but that's what it felt like. It's like the band's playing, and this was,
Yeah.
15 years ago that I was writing it because it was
Yeah.
why are we begging to be a part of that system? So
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that the student loan issue kind of has propped things up and like kind of kept it going and kind of made it possible for people to keep entering. And then the lack of or omission of data about how things are going and like, let's say how many people are leaving, not using their degree 5 years, 10 years after they get it. Um, and I guess that's why I'm I can understand the the rationale and the logic of like limiting the money. Um, I think it's very like jarring, like it's coming up quickly, and so that's really difficult for a lot of programs to grasp and adjust to. Um, but I do feel like the problem has been going on for so long, and that it's kind of been the new entrants who keep shouldering more and more risk and then kind of more and more blame. Like as the outcomes get worse and worse, then it's just more and more blame on the people who are coming in, who
yeah,
like kind of just got there.
I I took I think it was your write-up, maybe that I got through Lisa about or maybe it was Lisa's piece about the impact of what, the potential of what's going to happen as these student loan limits go into effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I forwarded it to somebody who's been involved with the national organization, the National Professional Organization for Acupuncturists for a long time. And
Hmm.
I mean, to her credit, like she focuses on a kind of a niche area now and has been doing it for too long. And I mean, I'll just say like even our national association has has no paid staff. I mean, we're
Mm.
like a profession that's talking about entering Medicare with a national professional association that has no paid staff. Anyway, and I said something about like the potential of this student loan thing. And she was kind of like, "Oh, well, I thought they just stopped that in the first Trump, thing or whatever. I thought that just went away because there was some back and
There
forth.
was.
It's
Yeah.
it's been kind of on the surface. And I think like many things, probably we're coming back to like climate change, where people have been like sounding the alarm for decades, but
Yeah.
like the impacts are still kind of small or easy to ignore, or well, it was that school, or we can blame it on this, or we can blame it on that. That
Yeah.
there's this perpetual like, it's not really going to be that bad, or we'll adjust, or whatever. So I think,
Yeah.
it has, in a way, because it's been an issue for so long and never yet, even though if we look at what's happening to the school already, clearly, and
Yeah.
when it comes to acupuncture schools, they're even before it goes into effect, we're seeing the consequences of not taking this stuff seriously.
Yeah.
But like people just keep, is that magical thinking, like The Secret again. It'll work out. We'll just like, as long as we think positively, we're really going to be, the next great thing. It's just like,
Yeah.
which I can understand from the point of view of practitioners, but it sounds like even the schools have not really, have just been able to just look away and keep doing what they're doing and like, well,
Mm.
that probably won't really happen. The next administration will come in and it'll
Mm.
go away, or
Yeah. 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 Well, so how long did you do the Acupuncture Observer and then you stopped in 2023? So why was
I
that?
looked the other day and it was I did over 100 posts over. I think
Okay.
I should have done my homework to go back and look. They're all there. It was probably about 10 years that I was writing
Mm.
regularly.
Wow.
Um, and it really just became, I was just saying the same few things over and over in a different way. Um,
Right. Right.
you know, this is just, this is not something I wrote about, but this is something that happened fairly recently that pisses me off. So I'm just going to share it with you.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if you know about injection therapy, but injection therapy
Hmm.
is injecting like injecting saline, or sometimes, I don't know, essential oils, or I don't know that much about it. It's not what I think of as being acupuncture. It's certainly not part of traditional acupuncture. It wasn't part of my education. But a group in Florida, a group of practitioners decided that we should have injection therapy written into our,
Hmm.
as something that's within our scope of practice. And one of the things I wrote about a long time ago is scope of practice and expanding it and what it means and what it doesn't mean. And anyway, um, so they passed legislation to get injection therapy included in their scope of practice, which then meant once it's in scope of practice, the expectation is that everybody within a field is going to be competent in that
Yeah.
modality. And so now people who want to be licensed in Florida to practice acupuncture have to also have taken a 60 hours of training in injection therapy.
Hmm.
As far as I know, I think it's something that a relatively small percentage of acupuncturists really want to do. But like I feel like it's relevant only because we're talking about the cost of education or the cost of getting a license. And
Yeah.
here's a group that decided I'm interested in this kind of niche practice. I'm I'm motivated to make this change, and now I've created a change that anybody who wants to practice in Florida now needs an additional 60 hours of training, which is going to cost something. It's not going to cost nothing. So it's like
Yeah.
if I were still writing, and I think I probably did write about this at other times when they were, writing herbs into regulation,
Yeah.
just to like um consider the consequences of the choices we're making. Like it sounds very good
Yeah.
to say, oh, we should be able to do X, or oh, we don't like it that we can't do Y.
Yeah.
But there's a cost to it all. There's a becoming doctors, becoming. So, I mean, that's a lot of what the Observer was like, is like, can we really explore what it means to take insurance and the impact on our practices before we go down
Yeah.
this route? Can we really consider look at what it means to like have everybody required to be a doctorate? And
Yeah.
it wasn't like there was new information coming up that was requiring me to rethink,
Right. Okay.
what I had already written. And I would sit down to write something and I'd want to refer to a post and I'd be like, damn, I wrote this same post like 5 years ago. Like, I don't need to be doing it anymore. And there was something so there is some, like part of my spirit has really been crushed in a way. Maybe that's overstating it, but like yes, to see these problems that to it's the way people who are have been climate activists kind of feel about continuing to work in that field. Like if you can't if you're just like shouting into the void, like, listen, pay attention, crisis
Yeah.
is coming, and nobody is listening, at some point you're like, I'm the only one. This is just suffering for me with no benefit for
Hmm.
anyone else. Like, it just
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
too painful to be like, I can't believe I'm still having to say, can we talk to an expert? You know? Um, So yeah, I got to a point where I was just like, I was tired of it, and I was
Uh,
like, I just want to spend the last part of my career where I can
right.
focus my energy on like actually treating my clients,
Right. Right.
know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
That
have this
makes
line
sense.
from, I think about this often. Clive James, who is a, did you watch Game of Thrones? Were you
Mm-hmm.
a Game of Thrones person? So Clive James is a reviewer, or was a reviewer for the New Yorker, a TV
Mm.
reviewer and stuff. And he was writing about Tyrion Lannister, who
Mm-hmm.
what,
Yeah.
and he says, um, his trial, so debarred by fate from military prowess, Tyrion has never been able to influence events except with his brain, and his trial is the show's clearest proof that in an unreasonable society, to have reasoning power guarantees nothing except the additional mental suffering that accrues when circumstances remind you that you are powerless.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
that was kind of what happened with the Observer. Like, I feel like what I'm saying here is reasonable about
Mm-hmm.
looking before you leap or looking at the consequences of some of these choices. But when you're powerless, it got to a point where it's like, well, I don't seem to have the power to actually make any of the changes that I feel like need to be made. And so it's just causing me suffering. And if I can just kind of avert my gaze from what's happening,
Yeah.
like I will be a little bit happier, and
Yeah.
continuing to stare at it isn't changing the outcome any. So I might as well
Yeah.
save myself. That's sort of what happened.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you were advocating for a lot of stuff that was going to improve things for other people and for people coming in later. It wasn't necessarily that that all these things you talk about were going to directly benefit you immediately.
Oh, I didn't think, for me, all of it, all along, I think my one point, I didn't even have to write the blog. I could have just written, like one thing that was like, do some research or like consider the consequences of your actions. Like that
Right,
pretty much
right.
was it. It wasn't,
Yeah, yeah.
for me, really none of it really directly impacted my practice or what I
Yeah.
did. You know, I
Yeah.
graduated at a time where a master's was enough. I got licensed. I maintained my license.
Yeah.
I took the damn exam, you know, it, I knew that I didn't want to get involved in the insurance model, and that I had been established enough
Hmm.
that I didn't have to do that. Um,
Yeah.
for me, it was just I really did care about the profession and the medicine, and I really saw the promise of it, and really hoped to guide it on a path to success. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's what it was. That's what it was all about. And the debt stuff aside, I don't think the profession, I don't I don't know what we refer to when we refer to the profession. You know,
Mm,
like the group of individuals who are making the decisions. It was just like
yeah.
magical thinking and short-term thinking and
Yeah. Well, I think like a little bit how I feel about naturopathic medicine is we don't really know what we are anymore. It's kind of it's not coherent. There's no like central like I don't like what is the brain doing of the group? Like who what composes the brain and what are the like annual processes, right? Like where is that web page that shows like here's like every 3 years our sort of plan and like how could I ever participate in it or like influence it, you know?
yeah,
Um and so and then you keep adding things onto it sort of maybe without trimming anything off in a meaningful way or optimizing things and it feels like a very diffuse group and
yeah,
everybody's kind of doing their like we talk about the lineages and the niches and people are kind of doing all their same things and everybody's trying to make it work financially in their own way. um but yeah, I couldn't really tell you what the strong goals are except there's always been the goal of getting into Medicare. um and maybe we tried to have a pay parity bill in Oregon so we could get the paid the same as other practitioners for the same codes. Um, and that didn't go through last session. Um, but like I just see things it seems to me like things are in decline, right? And I have reasons for saying that, like the enrollment's down, the income's down. Um, these the median debt is so high and the median earnings is so low, it doesn't make sense. I can't really like I couldn't recommend it to somebody and I would have to like show them the numbers also. I'd feel compelled to
right,
say, well, here you go. And these numbers indicate that you're not going to be able to pay off the cost of the training. It's too expensive. It doesn't work. Um, and I mean, some people might idealistically still go for it. I guess that's always uh, the chance of that happening. Yeah, that's always there. Um, but I do think a lot of the awareness is shifting into like, what's the value of it? It's like it's almost like everybody is starting to do their own individual research about the programs because they're realizing like, whoa, I see that I could get into this situation if I do go and do this degree, then what am I going to do with it afterwards and what's going to happen to me? because all these protective, we haven't really figured out consumer protection for higher education. It's not really that robust. That's sort of part of these, the Department of Education website that's going to come out and the accountability metrics. Like that's sort of headed in that direction. But it kind of is like it's in our economy, like there's so many scammy elements of it that people have also become more sensitive to it. And now I think like rightfully so, people aren't trusting institutions and so doing a little bit of due diligence, hopefully on their own. So that
Well,
would, and it's
yes,
sort of a corrective.
yeah. The other part of it, though, is I think so much of what potentially naturopaths, probably more so even than acupuncturists, offered. I mean, you can be an influencer on TikTok and make gobs of money selling natural whatever,
Yeah.
that's like total garbage,
Yeah.
which, I think it is hard for some of these alternative modalities to define. I mean, you were talking about core competencies in the beginning,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think the competencies in acupuncture, sure, you have like safety of like not hurting somebody with a needle and some level of, I mean, you have to, okay, diagnose and come up with a treatment plan. But we sort of joked, but it's not funny, that if you had a panel of five of the most respected acupuncturists, in the country on a panel and presented one patient to them, there probably would be five different takes on, well, I would do these points. No, I would do these points.
Yeah.
Well, I would see this as the underlying problem. So, when it comes to medicine, to Western medicine, if we took somebody to, one patient with one clear Western diagnosis to five doctors, and the five doctors were like, I mean, yeah, of course, there might be different treatment recommendations specifically, like this is the specific surgery I would do versus this is the specific surgery. But if one person is like, no, it's not your liver, it's your, whatever,
Yeah.
it's just like, I think it becomes then very hard to distinguish the, like, what am I learning in these very expensive programs
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
distinguishes me from what, you know, somebody who listened to some podcast on
Mm.
nutrition is going to say or whatever. So,
Yeah.
I think
Right.
that's part of it too. And that makes it hard for me because, clients will ask me something about why I'm doing a certain point. And like, sometimes what I say and believe to be true, though, is like this energetic talk that is completely untestable. Like, and people come to me because I have this degree and because they're led to like, oh, you have this inner special knowledge. Like when you read my pulses, and I think there are practitioners who can do that. But I mean, for me, the healing relationship is much more of a conversation of like, how are you thriving? How are you not thriving? So when we talk about Medicare and stuff like that, that's the other whole thing, or the insurance model. The insurance model is like, we need to see on a chart,
Yeah.
this change in condition. And if I'm saying, but my client, feels so much better and is doing so much more, but yes, there still are getting migraines, like, as far as insurance is concerned, that's an ineffective treatment. And it just, I mean, it
Hmm.
does to me also complicate the whole bigger picture of like what sometimes I begin to think that these schools to an extent are sort of a purchasing a diploma online. I mean, you hear about nurses who like,
Hmm.
or whatever profession, who like bought
Yeah.
their credentials from some, you know, and I mean,
Yeah.
I really don't think that's what the schools are, but it sometimes can become hard to define what it is that like what I've learned that's testable or translatable to what really happens in a treatment room. That, yeah, I don't, I like, I think it is harder for some of these um, these modalities that are a little bit existing outside of what we think about credentialing and testing and, you
Yeah.
know,
Right.
this
Yeah.
kind
Maybe it's
of
not that. Yeah. Maybe it's not that type of thing, or it's not that type of thing to the extent that we're acting like it is. It's
right.
like, well, actually, you can learn to be safe with acupuncture in this long, and then the rest is really choose your own adventure, continuing education, learn
Yeah.
whatever point
Yeah.
system
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
because you're going to be safe. And then it's like, it's fine that five different people learn five different
Right.
systems beyond
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But that's not like maybe an expensive master's degree is not a great container
Or
for
certainly a
that.
doctorate to be like,
That
oh, well, they're
yeah,
a doctor.
right,
They're okay, that's nice.
right,
You
right.
know, other people that do weddings that are like, yes, I'm a minister of the Eternal Church of whatever. Like, I don't know, there's some church whenever somebody wants a
Yeah,
friend to officiate a wedding, you
yeah,
can go, get that. But I mean,
yeah.
another thing you were saying, at some point, our national organization got a chunk of money, a grant, or somebody gave a good I don't remember the circumstances, but and I convinced I was like, we need to do strategic planning. We've had like
Mm,
splits, we've had fights, who's going to be in charge of the states. This probably happens with naturopaths too, is like different states have different rules. How much should we
hmm
try and have one standard? How much should we let the states be? So I was like, let's hire a professional to do strategic planning. That was my
mm.
hope that we would like look at some of this like big plan, big
Okay.
picture. What are the
I feel
numbers?
like
What's the direction? What are it
I
became the person. So we had these meetings and it became like a um it was like a how were we going to market ourselves? Like what images did we think of when we thought of acupuncture?
okay.
Like what
That was
images did we think of when we if we wanted to describe what
the
words would we
brand.
use to
Yes.
describe it was
Yeah.
a branding exercise.
Yeah.
And that too was like at the end of my involvement with these groups because I was like this was our last, we were already, all the
Can't do.
organizations are so short on money too, like to have a
Yeah.
chunk of money to be like, okay, we're gonna like
Yeah, yeah.
strategic planning. And what I thought that meant was like, who's coming into the profession, who's retiring, like
Yeah,
what
yeah.
the math mean or whatever, not like
Yeah.
the strategic planning is we're going to present ourselves as the needling experts who, what,
Mm,
yeah. So it's this, it probably, it is this intersection, I think, between this capitalistic, you know, uh, hard reality of like numbers that we have to exist in. Like if we're going to be a profession in the United States, what does that mean to have schools? And at the same time, but the group of people who primarily kind of are attracted to it are much like, you know, not so like numbers oriented and here's the test results and here's what we're going to do and here's,
yeah.
so I think it is this kind of dichotomy between these two very different, the yin and the yang, but somehow we're
Mm.
not like flowing gently together. We're just, "Arr."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so as we finish up here, I wonder if is there like reason to be sort of optimistic? Is like little seeds of change or hope that like you're hopeful about like through this big change and through the acupocalypse, like do you see like certain threads that you think can work out and like certain forms of the profession that have a better chance of staying around?
Well, one thing I tell myself, being optimistic probably would be overstating it. I mean,
Mhm.
I do feel like the medicine will survive. I mean, the medicine or acupuncture, the teachings, the knowledge, I mean, it's gone back for thousands of years and been through many greater upheavals than what
Mm,
happens with, um, yeah, than what happens with student loans in the United States.
mm,
The profession or the schools, I'm not, I really don't know where to look to be optimistic.
mhm.
Um, I don't, I mean, I don't even feel like people recognize the magnitude of the problem.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how it's going to be resolved. I mean, I think there will be pockets that will survive, and I think there's people doing stuff like, community acupuncture or spreading the 5 needle protocol probably will survive because
Mm,
that's people are being taught who are just lay people, and I think that's probably, I don't know. I mean, if we look at the whole state of the country, I mean, there's many problems we could,
yeah.
we, you know, maybe if we go back to a barter economy, all the people that are trained in acupuncture will be fine. I'll get eggs for it. But in terms of it taking its place beside Western medicine as a part of the
Mm,
insurance covered, it's hard for me to imagine a path for that, which is just crazy making because people want it. Lots of people get acupuncture,
yeah.
I, it is pretty unbelievable that at a time where the demand is truly there. And I know some people feel like the demand isn't there, but at least where I am, maybe it's a place where people are more open-minded or have traveled more. But you know, I get calls from people who are like, I've lived in 5 different cities. I've had a great acupuncturist in all of them. I need to get started with you. Like, uh,
Mm,
people call me all the time. Some people call me who, like, because I don't take insurance, it's not an option for them. And, I try and steer people in the right direction. But so it is, uh, crazy making that here is this thing that people want. I go visit my mother who's in like an independent living senior place. And every time I'm at lunch, and of course my mother's like, oh, my daughter, the acupuncturist. And everybody's like, oh, I love acupuncture. I got it for my shoulder. It was so great. It helped so much. And
yeah.
so like people want it to have the schools closing and people not entering the profession and people going out of business. And it, it's just it takes so many short-sighted decisions. It
Mm,
has taken so many short-sighted decisions to get us into
yeah.
this situation or unresolved, inability to find common ground.
Yeah.
Um, but that seems to be sort of a global problem, not just for acupuncture, but for
Mm,
many things these days, where
yeah.
like we just can't figure out a path forward together and things are splitting apart.
Mm,
And seems like somehow they shouldn't have to do that, but that's what's happening. So,
hmm. Yeah. So it sounds like there is acupuncture can meet this need, this human need. Um, but the the way it's packaged or contained or the requirements to get to the place where you can meet that need is not going very well. And it looks like it's gonna
yeah,
break
kind
break
of
up,
this
break apart.
the structures that we've developed
Yeah.
to provide this desired service to people
Yeah.
are in fact getting in the way of it being
Yeah.
provided.
Yeah, that's kind of yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, okay, these got started, they got built up, but now they're kind of holding things back. They're preventing change. They're kind of preventing the innovation that's needed. Um, and that's too bad. It's kind of it's a tragedy in a way. It's really, yeah, it's a bummer. Um, but maybe there's like sort of some lessons to learn, and maybe we can kind of, yeah, I'm just hoping that some sort of that that pivot happens or change happens or enough people make the change, even if it has to happen apart from the large institutions.
Yeah, I mean, the medicine will keep on being there. And so it
Hmm.
seems like somehow there should be some way, maybe it's like a I don't know, we've got these hammerhead worms that have like come to the United States now that I think are also from China that are like these uh they're bad. They're not good and they one of the things is if they, get chopped up into pieces, they like each of those pieces can become another worm. So they're like if you see them and kill them, you have to like put them in salt and like there's this whole process to make so like I guess maybe I feel like it could be like the worm where
Yeah,
we'll get cut up in little pieces and some of those pieces will go on to thrive and maybe turn into something good. I don't want to be a toxic hammerhead worm, but yeah, you can't, the fact that so many people want it, I think reflects that there is something of real value there.
yeah,
And so yeah, I mean, I guess I don't want to say there's no hope, but there's enough once you have things codified in law that depend on certain organizations to be there that and it again it
right.
takes a lot of work to it took a lot of work to put these to develop these things in the first place. And so
Hmm.
if they collapse,
Yeah,
figuring out the way forward, it's like who's going to
that's
be there
more
to do
work.
it and who's
Yeah,
going to yeah.
yeah,
So I don't know.
yeah. All right, we're gonna find out in the next few years. So, yeah, thank you very much for talking and sharing your thoughts, and I look forward to the continued communication with you.
Well,
So,
you are
yeah,
very
really
welcome.
appreciated it.
I used to be a nightmare at, parties because people would ask me a question about acupuncture and I'd go into some long, drawn out. So even though I find it depressing, it is something that I like. It's important to me to talk about, and I'm glad for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
opportunity to do it, even if it's kind of feels like a downer.
That's
Uh,
okay. Yeah, I mean that's where that no, that's realistic. That's kind of where we're at. Like we
yeah,
gotta, like you said, acknowledge the problem to hopefully find some
yeah,
solutions.
yeah.
So
All
yeah,
right.
thank you
Well.
so much.
You are very welcome. Thank you for your good work. And I'm glad you're digging into these issues and, pointing to really important things.
Me
So
too. Yeah,
thanks.
you're welcome.
All right. Take
Bye.
care. Be well.